My name is Madison Walker, and I'm 32 years old. 3 weeks ago, I discovered that my parents had drained my trust fund nearly $200,000 that my grandfather had set aside for me. They used it all to fund my younger sister Natalie's extravagant lifestyle, assuming I'd never find out or would stay quiet if I did. They thought they were so clever, but they missed one crucial detail about the account. When the bank manager called me with urgent news, I watched their confident smiles fade as they learned about the safeguard my grandfather had secretly put in place. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever had family take advantage of you, and stick around to see how justice finally caught up to mine. I grew up in Westfield, a wealthy suburb where success was measured by the size of your house and the prestige of your job title. My father, Richard Walker, was a corporate attorney who specialized in mergers and acquisitions. My mother, Diane, worked as an interior designer for the area's elite. From the outside, we had the perfect upper-middle-class life, a colonial-style home, with a manicured lawn, summer vacations in Martha's Vineyard, and the latest model luxury cars parked in our driveway. But inside our household, there was a clear hierarchy, and I was definitely at the bottom. 4 years younger than me, Natalie became the center of attention from the moment she was born. While I had my mother's plain brown hair and average features, Natalie inherited my father's striking blue eyes and natural blonde hair that strangers would comment on wherever we went. "She's going to be a heartbreaker," they'd say while I stood awkwardly beside her invisible. Beyond her looks, Natalie had a magnetic personality. She was outgoing and charming from an early age, easily making friends and winning over adults with her theatrical personality. I was quieter, more analytical, preferring books and computers to social gatherings. In our family dynamic, her traits were celebrated while mine were tolerated at best. The disparity in how we were treated became more obvious as we got older. For my 10th birthday, I received a modest party at home with pizza and a store-bought cake. For Natalie's 10th birthday just 4 years later, my parents rented out an entire children's museum and hired professional party planners. "Your sister is more social," my mother explained when I questioned the difference. "She has more friends to invite." But the inequity went beyond birthday celebrations. When I needed braces, my parents opted for the basic metal kind covered by insurance. When Natalie needed them, she got the premium clear aligners that cost thousands more. When I wanted to attend a writing camp during summer break, I was told to get a part-time job to pay for it. When Natalie wanted horseback riding lessons, my parents immediately signed her up for the most expensive stable in the county. My grandfather, my father's father, was the only one who seemed to notice the disparity. Walter Walker was a self-made man who had built a successful construction company from nothing. Unlike my status-conscious parents, he valued hard work and integrity above appearances. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, Maddie," he would tell me during our private conversations. "Sometimes the quiet ones are watching and learning while everyone else is talking." When I was 16, I overheard an argument between my grandfather and my father after a family dinner. "You're making a mistake with Madison," my grandfather said firmly. "She's smart and capable, but you don't give her half the opportunities you give Natalie." "Dad, you don't understand modern parenting," my father replied dismissively. "Natalie is naturally gifted. She needs those opportunities to reach her potential." "And what about Madison's potential?" my grandfather challenged. "Madison is different," my father said with a sigh. "She'll be fine, but she's never going to shine the way Natalie does. We're just being realistic about where to invest our resources." I slipped away before they could discover me eavesdropping, but those words burned into my memory. I was an investment my parents had deemed not worth making. Despite their lack of support, I worked hard in school and secured a scholarship to attend State University, where I majored in computer science. My parents attended my high school graduation, but spent most of the ceremony talking about Natalie's lead role in the school play the week before. They contributed nothing to my college education, telling me that student loans would teach me financial responsibility. Meanwhile, Natalie was accepted to an exclusive private university, and my parents paid her full tuition, housing, and expenses without hesitation. When I questioned this disparity during a rare visit home, my sophomore year, my mother seemed genuinely confused. Natalie is pursuing theater and communications. Those kinds of careers are about connections, so she needs to be at the right school. Your field is more technical. It doesn't matter as much where you graduate from. That Christmas, my grandfather took me aside and handed me an envelope. "Don't tell your parents," he said quietly. "I've set up a trust fund for you. It's not accessible until you're 30, but it should help you get a start in life when the time comes. Maybe buy a house or start a business." I hugged him tightly, grateful for his recognition and support when my parents offered so little. That was the last Christmas we had with him. My grandfather passed away from a heart attack 3 months later, leaving behind a void that felt especially vast for me. After his death, my parents barely discussed the trust fund he'd established for me. When I asked about it once, my father waved his hand dismissively. "It's being managed by the family trust attorney. Don't worry about it until you're 30. I took him at his word, focusing instead on building my career. After college, I secured a job at a technology company, working my way up from junior developer to project manager over the course of several years. I moved to Seattle, putting physical distance between myself and my family, visiting only for major holidays, and occasionally calling to check in. Natalie, meanwhile, graduated from her expensive university and moved to Los Angeles to pursue acting. From what I gathered through our parents' endless stories and social media posts, she bounced between minor roles and service jobs, living in a luxury apartment they subsidized and driving a car they financed. Natalie is networking with some very important industry people. My mother would gush during our phone calls. It's just a matter of time before she gets her big break. I often wondered how much money they poured into supporting her career, but it wasn't my business, or so I thought. Little did I know that their financial support of Natalie was much more my business than I realized. My 30th birthday passed with little fanfare. My parents sent a generic card with a gift certificate to a department store, while Natalie forgot completely until a week later when she posted a belated message on my social media. I wasn't surprised or even particularly hurt anymore. Their behavior was entirely consistent with the pattern established throughout my life. What I was looking forward to was finally accessing my trust fund. According to what my grandfather had told me years ago, I would be able to access it now that I had reached the designated age. I had been saving for a down payment on a condo in Seattle, where housing prices were steep, and the trust fund would make homeownership a reality much sooner than I had anticipated. 2 months after my birthday, having heard nothing from the family trust attorney my father had mentioned, I decided to be proactive. I contacted my father for the attorney's information. "Oh, right," he said, sounding distracted. "I'll have to look that up. The trust is with Westfield National Bank, though. You could start there." That small detail was enough for me to begin my inquiry. I called Westfield National Bank and asked about a trust fund established by Walter Walker for Madison Walker. "I'll need to connect you with our trust department," the representative said. "Please hold." After a brief wait, a woman with a professional tone came on the line. "This is Evelyn Moore, head of the trust department. How can I assist you?" I explained the situation, providing my identification details when requested. "Yes, I see the trust established by Walter Walker," she confirmed. "However, I'm showing that this account was nearly depleted approximately 2 years ago. There's only a residual balance of $342 remaining." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible. The account should have around $200,000. I haven't accessed it at all." According to our records, a series of withdrawals were made authorized by the CO trustees Richard and Diane Walker. My parents, my co-trustees. The realization hit me like a physical blow. "I was told I couldn't access the funds until I turned 30, I said, my voice shaking slightly. "That's partially correct. Evelyn replied. You couldn't access the funds independently until 30, but your KEO trustees could make withdrawals if they deemed them necessary for your welfare education or support. And that's what they claim these withdrawals were for. I can't discuss the specific justifications provided, but yes, the withdrawals were processed under the welfare and support provisions. I thanked her for the information and hung up, my mind racing. Nearly $200,000 gone, and I had a sickening suspicion where that money had actually gone. I spent the next week doing my own investigation. I requested copies of all documentation related to the trust which the bank provided after verifying my identity as a beneficiary. The paperwork confirmed my fears. Over the past 5 years, my parents had systematically drained my trust fund through dozens of withdrawals, each one justified with vague descriptions like beneficiary support or educational advancement. But I had received no support. I had paid for my own education through scholarships and loans. The money had gone elsewhere, and given the timing of the larger withdrawals which coincided with Natalie's move to Los Angeles, the purchase of her luxury car, and a career investment my mother had vaguely mentioned, I knew exactly where. Armed with this information, I took 2 weeks of vacation time and flew back to Westfield. I didn't tell my parents I was coming. Instead, I checked into a hotel and contacted James Bennett, a lawyer who specialized in trust litigation. After reviewing my documentation, he confirmed what I suspected. This appears to be a clear breach of fiduciary duty, he said gravely. Your parents had a legal obligation to manage the trust in your best interest, not redirect the funds to another family member. What are my options? I asked. We can file a civil suit to recover the funds plus possible damages. There could also be criminal implications for fraud, though pursuing that route would obviously have significant consequences for your family relationships. I considered my options carefully. Despite everything, I wasn't sure I wanted to see my parents facing criminal charges. But I did want accountability, and I wanted my grandfather's gift restored. Let's start with a demand letter, I decided. Make it clear that I have evidence of their misappropriation and that I'm prepared to take legal action if necessary. James nodded approvingly. That's a measured approach. We'll send the letter and see how they respond. With the demand letter drafted, I decided to deliver it personally. I wanted to see their faces when they realized their scheme had been discovered. But before I could put that plan into action, an unexpected call changed everything. My phone rang with an unfamiliar local number. When I answered, I was surprised to hear Evelyn Moore from Westfield National Bank again. Ms. Walker, I'm calling because there's been a development regarding your grandfather's trust that I believe you should be aware of immediately. What kind of development? I asked, immediately alert. Upon further review of the trust documentation, our legal department has identified an additional provision that appears to have been overlooked during previous administration. It's somewhat unusual, but your grandfather included a verification clause requiring that all withdrawals over $5,000 must be acknowledged in writing by the beneficiary you after reaching the age of 25, regardless of trustee authorization. My heart began to race. What does that mean exactly? It means that any withdrawal over $5,000 made after your 25th birthday without your written acknowledgement was processed in error and contrary to the terms of the trust. She paused. There were 17 such transactions totaling approximately $185,000. I sat down stunned by this revelation. So the bank made an error. Yes, Evelyn admitted. Our trust officers should have enforced this provision, but failed to do so. In light of this significant oversight, Westfield National Bank is legally obligated to restore those funds to your trust account immediately with accrued interest. We will then pursue recovery separately from the trustees who initiated the unauthorized withdrawals. My grandfather, it seemed, had anticipated something like this might happen. He had built in a safeguard to protect me even after his death, a safeguard that had finally been discovered. When will the funds be restored? I asked, my mind still processing this unexpected turn of events. The restoration has already been initiated. The funds should be available within 48 hours. Additionally, the bank will be contacting the Keogh trustees, your parents, regarding repayment of the improperly withdrawn amounts. After ending the call, I sat in my hotel room, a mix of emotions washing over me. Vindication, certainly. Relief that I wouldn't need to pursue a lengthy legal battle. But also a profound sadness that it had come to this, that my parents had so thoroughly betrayed both me and my grandfather's wishes. I decided to change my approach. Instead of delivering the demand letter, I would confront my parents directly, now armed with the knowledge that the bank would be contacting them imminently about their misappropriation. It was time for a family meeting where all the cards would finally be laid on the table. I arrived at my parents' house unannounced on a Sunday afternoon, knowing they would likely be home. Their surprised expressions when they opened the door quickly shifted to forced smiles and awkward welcomes. "Madison, what an unexpected surprise," my mother said, embracing me stiffly. "Why didn't you tell us you were coming to town?" "I thought it would be better this way," I replied neutrally. "We need to talk." My father's eyes narrowed slightly, perhaps detecting something in my tone. "Of course, come in. Is everything all right?" "No," I said, simply following them into the familiar living room. "Everything is not all right." As we sat down, I noticed new furniture and expensive-looking artwork on the wall, and other signs of recent spending. I wondered bitterly how much of my trust fund had paid for these upgrades. "Is Natalie in town?" I asked casually. "No, she's in Los Angeles," my mother replied. "She's just been cast in a small recurring role on a new streaming series. We're so excited for her." "That's nice," I said, my voice deliberately flat. "Did my trust fund pay for that too?" The silence that followed was deafening. My parents exchanged quick, alarmed glances before my father leaned forward, his expression carefully controlled. "What exactly are you implying, Madison?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating a fact. I know you've emptied my trust fund, the money Grandpa set aside for me to support Natalie's lifestyle and career aspirations." My mother's hand fluttered to her throat. "That's not... We didn't..." "Please don't lie to me anymore," I interrupted. "I have all the documentation from the bank showing every withdrawal date's amounts and the vague justifications you provided. Nearly $200,000 meant for my future gone." My father's face hardened. "Now wait just a minute. As trustees, we had the legal right to make withdrawals for your benefit." "For my benefit," I repeated. "Not for Natalie's apartment or her car or her acting classes or whatever else you spent it on while I was working overtime and paying off student loans. Family resources should go where they'll do the most good." My father argued, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he'd used throughout my childhood whenever his decisions were questioned. "Natalie needed that support to pursue her dream. Your career was already established." "They weren't family resources," I shot back. "That was my inheritance from Grandpa. He set it up specifically for me because he saw how you favored Natalie. He wanted to make sure I had something of my own." My mother's expression turned pleading. "Madison, you have to understand. Natalie's field is so competitive. Without proper backing, she'd never have a chance. We were just trying to balance things out." "Balance things out?" I let out a hollow laugh. "You've been balancing everything in her favor my entire life. My birthday parties, my braces, my education. I always got the minimum while she got the best. And when Grandpa finally tried to even the scales a little, you found a way to take that from me too." My father stood up, pacing the room. "You're being dramatic. We've always treated you and Natalie equally." "That's a lie, and you know it," I said quietly. "But it doesn't matter anymore. The bank called me yesterday." They both froze, my father mid-pace. What do you mean the bank called? He asked cautiously. I allowed myself a small smile. It turns out Grandpa was smarter than any of us realized. He included a special verification clause in the trust. Any withdrawal over $5,000 made after I turned 25 required my written acknowledgement regardless of trustee authorization. My father's face paled visibly. That's impossible. I reviewed the trust document carefully. Apparently not carefully enough. The clause was there, but the bank failed to enforce it until now. They've already restored the full amount to my trust account with in interest, and they'll be contacting you both very soon about repayment. My mother collapsed back onto the sofa. Repayment? But we don't have that kind of money just sitting around. You should have thought of that before you stole from me, I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. We did not steal, my father insisted, though his confident facade was crumbling. We made decisions we thought were in the family's best interest. No, you made decisions that were easiest for you, continuing the pattern you've maintained my whole life, giving Natalie everything and me the leftovers. As if on cue, my father's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression tightened. It's Westfield National Bank. You should probably take that, I suggested. He walked into the kitchen to answer, leaving my mother and me in uncomfortable silence. After a few moments, she spoke, her voice small. We never meant to hurt you, Madison. I studied her face, searching for sincerity. The problem is, Mom, you never thought about me at all. Not really. I was an afterthought my entire life. That's not true, she protested weakly. Isn't it? Can you name a single instance where you put me first? Where my needs or wants took priority over Natalie's? She opened her mouth, then closed it again, unable to produce an example. My father returned, his face ashen. They're demanding repayment within 90 days, or they'll file a lawsuit and place liens on our property. What are we going to do? My mother asked him anxiously. He sank heavily into his chair. I don't know. We might have to take out a home equity loan or liquidate some investments. I watched them processing this reversal of fortune, feeling a complex mix of emotions, satisfaction that justice was being served, but also sadness that it had come to this, that my own parents had betrayed me so thoroughly. I have a proposal, I said after a moment. I'm willing to work with the bank to establish a reasonable repayment schedule instead of demanding the full amount immediately. Hope flickered across their faces. But I have conditions, I continued. First, I want a full accounting of where every dollar of my trust fund went. Second, you need to be honest with Natalie about the situation and the source of her funding all these years. And third, I want a genuine acknowledgement from both of you about the way you've treated me compared to her throughout our lives. My father's jaw tightened. That seems excessive. It's actually quite generous considering the alternative, I replied evenly. The bank's legal department is already involved, and I've consulted with a trust litigation attorney who assures me this is a clear case of breach of fiduciary duty with potential criminal implications. My mother gasped. Criminal, Madison, we're your parents. Yes, you are, which makes your betrayal all the worse. I stood up, gathering my purse. You have 24 hours to decide. Either agree to my terms, or I'll let the bank and the legal system handle it without my intervention. As I walked to the door, my father called after me. Where will you be staying? The Westfield Inn, I replied without turning around. Room 215. You can call me when you've made your decision. I left them sitting in their expensively furnished living room, surrounded by the trappings of privilege that had in part been purchased with money meant for my future. As I drove back to my hotel, I felt neither triumph nor vindication, just a hollow ache for the family relationship I'd never truly had and now might never have. The 24 hours I'd given my parents passed with no word from them. I wasn't surprised. Pride had always been one of my father's defining characteristics, and admitting wrongdoing wasn't in his nature. I was preparing to inform James Bennett, my attorney, to proceed with more aggressive action when my phone finally rang. "Madison, it's Dad." My father's voice sounded strained. "Your mother and I have discussed your proposal." "And," I prompted when he paused, "we'd like to meet with you to discuss the terms." We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe near my hotel, a neutral location where we could speak privately without the emotional weight of the family home. When I arrived, I was surprised to see not just my parents, but Natalie as well, looking confused and slightly irritated. "What's going on?" I asked as I sat down, addressing my parents but glancing at my sister. I didn't expect Natalie to be here. "We thought it was important for all of us to be present," my mother explained. "Since this affects the entire family." Natalie frowned. "Mom and Dad said there's some kind of financial situation, but they wouldn't explain until you got here." "What's happening?" I looked at my parents expectantly. "Yes, please explain to Natalie what's happening." My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Natalie, there's been a complication with some family finances, specifically regarding your sister's trust fund." Natalie's brow furrowed. "Madison has a trust fund since when?" The fact that she didn't even know about my inheritance was telling. "Since Grandpa set it up for me before he died," I supplied. "Almost $200,000 that was supposed to be for me to access when I turned 30. "Oh," Natalie said, still looking confused. "So, what's the problem?" My father's jaw tightened as he struggled to continue. My mother jumped in, her voice falsely bright. "Well, as you know, we've been helping you financially these past few years while you establish your career. Your apartment, your car, those exclusive acting workshops." Understanding began to dawn on Natalie's face. "Wait, are you saying that money came from Madison's trust fund?" "We were trustees," my father said defensively. "We had the legal authority to make withdrawals." "For Madison's benefit," I interjected, "not to finance your other daughter's lifestyle." Natalie looked stricken. "I had no idea. You told me you were using your savings and investment income to help me." "We were just trying to give you the opportunities you deserved," my mother insisted. "Your career has such potential, and Madison was already established in her field. So you stole from her?" Natalie asked bluntly. My parents both flinched at the word. "We didn't think of it that way," my father said stiffly. "How else would you describe it?" I asked. "You took money specifically left to me and gave it to someone else without my knowledge or consent." Natalie turned to me, genuine distress in her expression. "Madison, I swear I didn't know. I would never have accepted their help if I'd known it was coming from your inheritance." Looking at her face, I believed her. For all her faults and the favoritism she'd benefited from throughout our lives, Natalie wasn't malicious. She was just accustomed to being the center of attention and receiving whatever she wanted, a pattern our parents had established and reinforced. "I know," I said quietly. "This isn't about you, Natalie. Not really. It's about the choices our parents made." My father straightened his shoulders. "We're prepared to accept your terms, Madison. We'll provide a full accounting of the withdrawals, and as you can see, we've already informed Natalie of the situation." "And the third condition?" I prompted. "A genuine acknowledgement of how you've treated me compared to Natalie throughout our lives." He looked pained, glancing at my mother for support. She reached over and squeezed his hand. "Madison," my mother began hesitantly, "we've always loved both of you. But looking back, I can see that we may have allocated our attention and resources unevenly." "May have," I raised an eyebrow. "Did," she corrected herself after a moment. "We did treat you differently, and that wasn't fair." My father nodded stiffly. "Your mother and I have had some difficult conversations in the past 24 hours. We recognized patterns we hadn't fully acknowledged before." "Like what?" I pressed, needing to hear them say it explicitly. He sighed heavily. Like consistently prioritizing Natalie's activities and desires over yours. Spending more on her education, her extracurriculars, her celebrations. Making her the focus of family decisions. Why? I asked simply. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. It was my mother who finally answered. Natalie was easier for us to understand. She was outgoing, expressive, similar to us in many ways. You were always so self-contained, so independent. We told ourselves you didn't need as much from us. Everyone needs their parents' support and attention, I said quietly. Even the quiet ones, especially the quiet ones. Natalie, who had been listening intently, suddenly spoke up. I never realized how different things were for us. I mean, I knew I got certain things, but I guess I never really thought about it. You weren't supposed to, I told her. It wasn't your responsibility to notice or correct the imbalance. It was theirs. I gestured toward our parents. What happens now? My father asked, his usual authoritative tone replaced with uncertainty. Now I contact the bank and work out a reasonable repayment schedule for you, I replied. And we all decide what kind of relationship we want going forward. I want to make this right, Natalie said suddenly. The apartment, the car, everything they've been paying for, I'll sell it all and contribute to the repayment. You don't have to do that, I began, but she shook her head firmly. I do, actually. I've been living off money that was rightfully yours, and maybe it's time I stood on my own 2 feet anyway. I studied my sister, seeing, perhaps for the first time, the person she might become without our parents' constant indulgence. There was strength there, and integrity I hadn't given her credit for. As we continued our discussion, mapping out practical steps and tentative plans for family healing, I realized something important was happening. For the first time in my life, my needs and feelings were being centered in our family dynamic. Not because I had demanded attention or created a crisis, but because justice had finally tipped the scales back toward balance. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Trust once broken is difficult to rebuild. But as we parted ways that afternoon with promises to meet again soon, I felt cautiously hopeful. My grandfather's final gift to me hadn't just been financial security. It had been the catalyst for a long overdue reckoning and the possibility of a healthier family future. In the months that followed our confrontation, significant changes unfolded in my family. My parents, true to their word, provided a detailed accounting of every withdrawal they had made from my trust fund. The document made for painful reading, seeing exactly how much had gone toward Natalie's luxury apartment, her car payments, her expensive acting workshops and headshot sessions, even a lavish 25th birthday trip to Hawaii that I hadn't even known about. The bank worked with them to establish a 5-year repayment plan secured by a lien on their house. It was a generous timeline, but would still require significant adjustments to their lifestyle. My father, who had planned to retire within the next few years, quietly acknowledged he would need to work longer than anticipated. Natalie, meanwhile, surprised everyone with her response to the situation. She immediately gave notice on her expensive Los Angeles apartment and moved into a modest, shared living arrangement with 2 other aspiring actresses. She sold her luxury car and bought a used sedan instead. Most significantly, she picked up additional work as a restaurant manager to supplement her inconsistent acting income, refusing any further financial assistance from our parents. I need to know I can make it on my own, she told me during one of our now regular phone calls. And honestly, it feels good. Scary, but good. Our relationship, previously distant and superficial, began to develop depth and authenticity. Without our parents' favoritism actively reinforcing our prescribed roles, we were free to discover each other as equals, as friends even. I found myself appreciating Natalie's resilience and humor while she expressed genuine interest in my work and life in Seattle. I never really understood what you did before, she admitted during one conversation. But it sounds fascinating and important. You've built something real while I've been playing pretend and letting Mom and Dad bankroll me. Your dreams aren't pretend, I assured her. You're talented. You just needed to pursue them on your own terms, not theirs. My relationship with my parents evolved more slowly and cautiously. The betrayal of trust had cut deep, and their acknowledgement of their lifelong favoritism, while important, couldn't instantly heal decades of inequality. 6 months after our confrontation, I returned to Westfield for Thanksgiving. The atmosphere was noticeably different from previous family gatherings. For one thing, the celebration was significantly scaled back, a reflection of my parents' new financial reality as they made regular payments toward the trust fund restoration. More importantly, the familiar dynamic of the Natalie Show was absent. My mother asked detailed questions about my work project managing a major software implementation. My father engaged me in a substantive discussion about my plans to use some of my trust fund to invest in a tech startup. When Natalie shared news about a small role she had secured in an independent film, it was celebrated appropriately without overshadowing everything else. After dinner, my mother found me alone in the kitchen as I helped with cleanup. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she said, carefully drying a serving platter. "About why we treated you and Natalie so differently." I paused in rinsing a glass, giving her my full attention. "I think in many ways you reminded me too much of myself," she continued. "Not the self I wanted to be, but the self I actually was growing up, serious intellectual, not the pretty or popular one. I pushed those parts of myself aside when I married your father, worked so hard to become someone who fit into his world of appearances and social standing." She set down the dish towel. "When I saw those qualities in you, I think I was afraid of what they represented. It was easier to focus on Natalie, who embodied everything I had trained myself to value." The honesty of her self-reflection surprised me. "That actually makes a lot of sense. It's not an excuse," she added quickly. "Just an explanation I've come to through therapy." "You're in therapy." This was even more surprising. She nodded. "Both your father and I are, separately and together. We realized we needed help to understand how we got here and how to do better going forward." That night, as I lay in my childhood bedroom, I reflected on how much had changed. The trust fund situation had forced a painful but necessary reckoning. My parents were being held accountable, yes, but they were also doing the harder work of examining the underlying patterns that had led to their behavior. Natalie was developing independence and a stronger sense of self, and I was finally being seen and valued within my family. On my last day in Westfield, I visited my grandfather's grave, bringing a small arrangement of his favorite flowers, simple daisies rather than elaborate blooms. Standing before his headstone, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. "You knew, didn't you?" I said softly. "You saw the dynamics clearly and tried to create some balance, and when that wasn't enough, you built in a safeguard that would eventually force the truth into the open." The verification clause in the trust had been his final act of protection, a time-delayed catalyst for change that had ultimately transformed our family. Whether he had anticipated the full extent of my parents' actions, I couldn't know. But he had created a mechanism that ensured accountability would eventually come. As I placed the flowers at the base of his headstone, I made a quiet promise to honor his legacy by maintaining the hard-won truth and balance in our family relationships. The money he had left me was significant, but his greater gift had been the opportunity for healing and authentic connection. Over the following year, our family continued to evolve. My parents made consistent payments toward the trust restoration, living more modestly, but with a new authenticity that actually seemed to suit them better than their previous status consciousness. Natalie's career took an unexpected turn when she discovered a talent for voice acting, securing regular work narrating audiobooks and doing commercial voiceovers. She remained in Los Angeles, but on her own financial footing, building a career through talent and persistence rather than parental subsidy. I used a portion of my restored trust fund as seed money for a tech startup focusing on accessibility software, partnering with a colleague who had innovative ideas but lacked capital. The venture showed promising early results, and I found deep satisfaction in using my grandfather's gift to create something meaningful that aligned with my values. When my parents' house needed a new roof, an expense they struggled to afford given their repayment obligations, I surprised them by covering half the cost. It wasn't about evening scores or establishing power. It was about demonstrating that family support could flow in all directions when built on respect rather than obligation. "You didn't have to do that," my father said when I told him. "I know," I replied, "but I wanted to. That's the difference." 2 years after the trust fund revelation, we gathered again for Thanksgiving, this time at my newly purchased Seattle condo, the first time our family holiday had ever been hosted anywhere but my parents' house. As we sat around my dining table, I looked at each of them, my father humbled but more authentic than I'd ever known him to be. My mother more relaxed and genuine without the constant pressure of maintaining appearances. Natalie confident in her hard-earned independence, and myself finally secure in my place within the family. We weren't perfect. The past couldn't be erased, and old patterns sometimes resurfaced, requiring conscious correction. But we were healthier, more honest, and more truly connected than I had ever believed possible. In the end, the trust fund my grandfather established had served its purpose, not just providing me financial security, but ultimately leading to something far more valuable: a family built on truth, accountability, and mutual respect. The safeguard he had put in place had protected more than money. It had created the possibility for genuine relationship where previously there had been only roles and appearances. For that, I would be forever grateful. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to share your own experiences in the comments below. Have you ever discovered a betrayal within your family? How did you handle it, and did it lead to positive change in the long run? Remember to hit that like button if you enjoyed this story. Subscribe to hear more family journey narratives and share with anyone who might need to hear that. Sometimes, confronting painful truths can lead to healing. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that even the most difficult family dynamics can transform when truth and accountability enter the equation.